Tyson Summers got the last set of documents from Jason, which were really important for Jason to be able to manage a specific portfolio. This was one of the largest portfolios that Ty was responsible for. It included the holdings of Wilson Graves, who was a billionaire investor and entrepreneur. He was known as Willie Graves. Willie liked to use his wealth to take over other companies. He bought stocks to gain control of them. Then he sold them quickly to make his investments more valuable. Other people who trusted Willie also got hurt because they were his lawyer and legal opponent. Ty kept Wilson honest and out of trouble with the SEC and other federal regulators who were watching individuals like Graves. This allowed Willie to amass more wealth, which benefited Summers, Reinhart, and Haynes. Jason also made progress in managing portfolios for his other clients, aiming to gain full control within the remaining 2 weeks. This would conclude the 3-month process of transferring all of Ty's clients, excluding his special clients. Only Jason, Reinhart, and Haynes were aware of Ty's impending retirement. It took about a month to transfer all of Ty's clients, except for his special clients, to Jason, Stacy, Reinhart, and Clayton. Ty reminded himself once more that it was time to let go and make personal time a priority. He was one of the founding fathers of the firm, along with Stacy and Clay. They transformed it from a small storefront law firm into one of Columbus, Ohio's largest and most influential. However, this success took a toll on Ty's personal life, impacting both his marriage to Bridget and their family. They celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary last month. Ty and Bridget had 2 children, aged 19. Jake is 19 and Tessa is 18. Old Tessa was doing well at college despite the material comforts. Ty realized that Bridget wasn't interested in their love life. While Ty was still keen, Bridget said her lack of interest was just a temporary phase. She promised to talk to her doctor about it during her next checkup, which was almost a year ago. Their love life hadn't improved, and Ty was frustrated. He decided to let it go for now. Bridget's frequent trips back to her hometown of Mansfield, Ohio, were a source of concern for Ty. She explained that it was due to her mother's declining health, and her sister Bianca, who lived there, needed assistance. Both still resided in Mansfield, and Bianca was divorced and alone, so Bridget's visits were beneficial to her. These trips started 6 months ago and now occur bi-weekly. Bridget left on Thursday morning and was back late Sunday night. She kept in touch by calling every evening at 9:000, and he made sure her cell was always accessible. This meant Ty spent 3 or 4 days alone every other week, which he didn't like. Bridget left this morning for her latest trip, leaving Ty alone again despite his disappointment. He told Bridget he was working on a big surprise in a couple of weeks. He even tried to pique her interest by mentioning Stacy's involvement, hoping her curiosity or even jealousy over Stacy would make her stay and find out the secret. Bridget showed minimal curiosity, and Ty wasn't surprised. He left her to it. After their usual goodbyes, Ty left for work, knowing she'd be gone within the hour. Later that day, Ty closed up his office, chatted with Rachel, his secretary, and walked down the carpeted hall to Stacy's office for a chat before heading home. He knocked once and pushed the door open, as he often did when he dropped by unannounced. He greeted Stacy and suggested they wrap up work for the day, offering to buy a drink. Stacy said she wasn't keen on going home to an empty house, as another colleague, Roger, was waiting for her. Roger Jr. was in a school play, and he had the lead role in Pirates of Doom. Ty teased Stacy about the play, but he said that parents are naturally biased when it comes to their children's performances. Stacy laughed and agreed. She's been happily married for the past 10 years, and she reassured Ty about the progress on the project. She also declined assistance from Jason, noting that everything was on track. She was concerned about Ty's upcoming retirement, though. She expressed her wish to talk him out of it, emphasizing that he had been the driving force behind the company's success. He said he was really proud of Stacy, and that she, Clay, and the younger team members would keep doing a great job. He also said he was impressed by how dedicated the younger generation was, and that he might offer Alice Chambers a partnership in the future. Stacy said she liked Jason and Alice, and that Raj would also be at the party. Ty welcomed Raj and said goodbye to Stacy, saying he'd see her the next day. Ty drove to his house in Columbus, which is on a 5-acre lot and has just over 5. The house had a hot tub flowing into a pool, a cabana, 2 tennis courts, and a spacious garden with flowers and flowering shrubs, which provided color throughout the summer and into the autumn when the kids went back to school. Bridget had let go of the cook and maid, leaving the house mostly empty. She acknowledged that it was too large for the 2 of them and suggested they should consider moving into something smaller. Maybe they should give it a couple more years. Ty parked in the 4 Arrows garage and entered the kitchen, where he placed a frozen dinner in the microwave. Changing into something more casual for the evening, he went back downstairs and heard the landline ring. He hoped it was about one of his ads, as it was too early for Bridget to call. When he answered, he was pleased to discuss his boat. A 32-feet powered sailboat moored at Lake Erie in the summer and autumn and stored at a facility on the lake in winter. After a productive chat with someone who'd taken the boat for a spin with the marina owner covering for Ty, we wrapped up the deal and agreed to send a cashier's check for the agreed-upon price to a P.O. box number tied to the transaction. Once we received the check, we'd transfer the title to the boat would be available at the marina. The purchaser had reviewed the title. When taking the boat out for a trial run, everything was in place. Bridget, who had never liked the boat and hadn't been out with Ty in years, would be pleased with the boat. She was sold on it, as was Ty, who had promised to sell his Jaguar and Audi. The high bidders had little left to worry about. 2 weeks from today, everything would be in place for his retirement. The house might take time to sell, but by then Ty and Bridget would be in the smaller bungalow ready for showings. He had already moved some furniture there, and any additional pieces could be purchased as needed. Ty ate his frozen dinner and decided to relax with some mindless TV and snacks. He took a bottle of cold Miller Lite to the entertainment room and watched some adult content. He thought the movie lacked imagination, with the actors repeating the same actions in the same way. He thought about taking matters into his own hands while the film was playing. Ty wondered why all the actors followed the same script, looking into the camera without any imagination, just trying to get people excited. He didn't feel like doing anything else. Bridget called and he answered. About the journey, Bridget told him it would be straightforward and mentioned that her mom was doing a little better, but her sister Bianca was stressed. She suggested staying an extra day if it was okay with Ty, despite feeling a bit uneasy. Ty brushed off the discomfort and agreed, telling Bridget he said he'd stay at work a little longer as it was lonely without her. He also asked if she needed anything and noted that she didn't take much with her. Bridget explained that she had things left behind and assured him that she would be fine. She then brought the surprise he had mentioned earlier, expressing her eagerness to find out what it was. Ty was somewhat surprised by her interest and informed her that it was right on schedule, with Stacy almost done with her part and the rest already in place. Bridget promised to call him tomorrow night and said goodbye. The call ended with a simple, "I love you." Ty noticed that Bridget didn't reciprocate his feelings with more than a quick goodbye. Despite this, he smiled, thinking that her eagerness to end the call might be because she had a lot on her mind with her mother. He then thought about Bridget's family. He observed the dynamics, noting the dysfunction and his own lack of fondness for her mother and sister Bianca, who had been divorced for cheating. So, the rest of my weekend is spent alone. He thought to himself, I should do something to occupy myself. He called the kids and talked with them for an hour or more, reminding them of his summons for them to come. In 2 weeks, he'd be back on his feet. He dozed off on the couch and woke up in the middle of the night with a stiff neck. He went to bed and slept without dreams, which was unusual but welcome. Lately, his dreams hadn't been pleasant. The next 2 weeks passed as normal, with Ty working to finish. He made sure that Jason was up to speed on all of his cases. He spent most of that second week calling his clients to let them know that he was retiring. They were happy for him and willing to work with Jason. A few wanted to speak to either Stacy or Clayton, so he made sure that they did. They were contacted right away, and everything was in place by that final Thursday when Bridget left for Mansfield. Ty had managed to keep his pending retirement secret from Bridget as planned. She rarely asked about his work anymore, so it wasn't much of a problem. Also, she had forgotten about the surprise, and Ty didn't bring it up again before she left. He would mention it on Sunday morning when she called to tell him she was about to leave, especially if she decided to stay an extra day. Either way, Ty was prepared. Friday marked Ty's ultimate day, filled with bustling activity, collaborating with Rachel. They cleaned the house and passed on the paper files to Jason after a few more phone calls. Ty told Rachel to redirect all his new calls to Jason in line with his plan. Rachel had already worked with her, so she was up to speed. Ty's last task was to tell Stacy to get things moving, and she said she would. She left for the courthouse later that morning, but Stacy promised to be back in time for the retirement party at the Risen Hotel. Everyone knew Bridget couldn't attend, but it didn't stop the celebrations. Ty left straight after lunch to get on with a few things, and by the afternoon, everything was ready to go. The final papers for the house were signed, and the movers were already on their way. They were committed to finishing by late Saturday afternoon. Once the movers finished, the crew Ty hired to clean the place thoroughly would arrive. They had orders to complete the task by that evening. They were promised a bonus if they finished on time. Realtors assured Ty that the for sale sign would be in the front yard by late tomorrow. This would reveal a listing of interested parties who wished to view the property starting the following Monday. Ty had priced it competitively to make sure it sold quickly. The last thing he had to do was make sure all the financial arrangements were in place. Bridget and he had 2 separate accounts, as well as a joint one. They each had a credit card, but Ty wanted them to only carry 1 card each. He didn't want them to run up a credit balance. Bridget was good at managing their accounts. She was also aware of Ty's private business accounts, which were managed by his company. However, she was not aware of Ty's personal accounts. At the company, Bridget never asked about or remembered the joint accounts. Ty closed them all with both their names on them. He transferred the retirement account to a new brokerage. He planned to manage all their joint affairs in cash, at least until they had settled on everything. The new home would be outside the U.S., so he moved the accounts beyond the U.S. He already had an online account with an international bank with outlets in Europe and South America. He was sure Bridget would easily adapt to the change, as she was very smart about money matters. Finally, Ty confirmed that the tickets were in hand. Thinking about spending the next few months with Bridget in a beautiful Costa Rican resort, sun, sand, swimming, sailing, horseback riding, they had it all. Ty had gone to the resort on his own to check it out and told Rachel to book the trip and make the reservations so everything would be confirmed by the time of his retirement. Tyson was doing well for himself, making a lot of money from handling He worked on high-profile cases for wealthy clients and charged accordingly. His clients recognized his expertise and retained him with substantial retainers. Ty invested his earnings in he's had some high-risk accounts that have made a lot of money over the years. As a lawyer, he used his legal knowledge to move most of his money into offshore accounts without any agreements with the U.S. These accounts stayed intact, which was good because if Bridget had known, she would have been amazed at how much they'd grown. This money was outside the U.S., so it wasn't subject to U.S. tax laws or the U.S. courts. Everyone in the firm kept it quiet, even though Bridget was suggesting retirement. It had been dropped over the past year. He thought her retirement would make her happy, given her complaints about the time he spent at work. He told everyone it would be a surprise for Bridget, with plans to announce everything on Sunday night when she returned. He was confident she would be home Sunday, intending to initiate the surprise during her morning call. So far, everything had gone perfectly. The party was enjoyable, with Ty dancing with all the women and talking to all the men, sharing war stories of their most interesting cases. Jason spent most of his time around Ty, ensuring nothing. Ty thought highly of Jason for seeing him as a valuable asset to the firm. Stacy and Clay knew all his plans and were sworn to secrecy as his attorneys. Stacy was happy for him. Ty danced with her, discussing the final steps. Stacy told Ty everything was ready for the surprise, including the checks and amounts to ensure Bridget's surprise and Ty's satisfaction. Ty was confident Bridget would enjoy the surprise. Stacy sarcastically agreed. Ty laughed and shared that he had tickets for a Costa Rica resort with plans to leave Sunday night. He promised to call her with a permanent number, but said his new cell would be active in the meantime. He suggested Roger and Stacy do something similar. Stacy replied that she enjoyed what she was doing too much to quit at the moment. Ty encouraged her to tell Clay that he was sorry for not including him in all their plans. Ty stayed at the party until almost midnight before leaving. He missed Bridget's call but found a voicemail. Bridget informed Ty that she was going to her mom's. That night, she asked him not to call so as not to wake her mother. She explained that her mother was tired all the time and needed to rest. Bridget promised to call the next night and asked Ty to be home. She said goodnight, as Ty expected she wouldn't call that night after leaving her message. He spent the evening packing his clothes and making sure Bridget's belongings were neatly packed. With limited time before Sunday night, he carefully and methodically packed her things to ensure a smooth process without any return trips after the movers finished tomorrow. He planned to stay at the bungalow tonight to make sure everything was ready for tomorrow. Once he had transferred everything to the bungalow, Ty wrapped up his tasks, made a phone call to confirm the last piece of the surprise was in place, and then went to bed. He was tired from the party and on edge, hoping nothing would go wrong. Saturday marked the packing and moving of the furniture from their home. Ty was a little sad, but he just shrugged his shoulders and left the movers to it. He was going back to the bungalow to meet their kids, who were arriving right around noon. Ty needed to go over his plans with them to avoid surprising them too much. He had given them a hint of his retirement but withheld details about Costa Rica or anything else. Now was the time to bring them up to date. He had to get them to promise not to call Bridget and spoil his surprise. He thought they would be okay with that. When they arrived, he welcomed them inside, sat them down, and began filling them in. He answered all their questions. Jake and Tessa were both unhappy with what he was doing, but he told them that he'd taken care of their college tuition and that they were always welcome back at home, no matter where they were. He also told them that he and Bridget had discussed and agreed upon his retirement as the right time to talk to her. He asked them to wait until Sunday night when she got home. They finally agreed and went out to dinner that evening. When Ty answered the 9, Bridget called. She kept it short as usual but didn't mention staying any longer, so he still expected her Sunday night after the call. The kids once again discussed his plans, wanting to be sure he still wanted to proceed. Ty assured them he was fine when they went to sleep in the spare room with twin beds. He made a phone call to confirm the movers were done and the cleaning crew was scheduled. Both were affirmative. Ty was pleased. He had just one more call to make, and then he was done for the night. Sunday was a day when there wasn't much to do and everything was ready to go. He checked the house and found that everything was in place. The movers and cleaners had left the place spotless and ready to show. He drove back to the bungalow and waited for the call from Bridget telling him she was ready to leave. He expected her to call at her normal time between 10 and 10. On the 30th, the kids had gone out to be with some of their friends from home, so Ty was alone when she called. He answered after the first ring. Nervously, he asked Bridget if she was ready to head home. She said she was just getting started and explained that she wanted to stay a few more days to give her sister Bianca more time to get things done. Bridget's voice was strained, as if she expected Ty to object. Well aware that he wouldn't like her request, Ty heard the words and, for the first time, felt the anger that he had been holding in check for the past several months. She'd been holding it in for the past few months, struggling to break free. She wanted to stay a few days longer. Well, he knew that now, didn't he? He'd known for over 3 months, long enough to start planning his surprise. Now was the time to bring his surprise to the front. It was time to do what he'd planned. Once he found out for sure, it was time to act. After keeping his anger in check for so long, Ty finally let it out. He told Bridget that he wouldn't mind her staying a few more nights. Ty confronted her about her involvement with Kevin and another man, Ben, sarcastically referring to Kevin as her lover. He stated that it bothered him and struggled to restrain himself from screaming at her. He accused her of carrying on these relationships for the past 6 months or longer. He was really frustrated at having to pretend it was nothing. There was silence at the other end, broken only by a sob, and then the phone went dead. He stared at it in his hand, as if it were a snake about to strike. He realized that Bridget had hung up, which was an unexpected surprise. He put the phone down on the table, his hand shaking with anger. She hung up, and he had no outlet for his pent-up frustration. Ty slumped into the chair beside the table, and his phone rang sharply. He stared at it uncomprehendingly as the sound reverberated from the walls. It was a disposable phone he'd purchased for this purpose. The phone he'd bought for this purpose continued to ring, not having voicemail. He finally picked it up and pushed the talk button. All he could get out was a yes. His anger had burned out with the sudden end of it all. He'd been primed for an argument, or a shouting match, or even a screaming match between the cheating wife and her scorned husband. Her abrupt termination caught him by surprise and extinguished his anger like a bucket of water on a flame. Now he was numb, dead inside, and numb with the pain he had been holding back with his plan of action. Without the cathartic outlet for his anger and hurt, he was suddenly helpless to stop the piercing. Ty was in pain. Bianca's angry voice came through the tiny speaker, urging him not to hang up and expressing concern for Bridget, who was described as a wreck and almost hysterical. She questioned him about what he had said to Bridget and what he had done to cause her extreme reaction. He was angry with Bianca. He felt she was just as guilty as his cheating wife for helping Bridget to betray him. He told Bianca that he had simply told Bridget to stay as long as she liked to spend extra time with her lover, Kevin Clark. He accused both Bianca and Bridget of being involved. Ben Stinson and Kevin gave their account of the meeting at the motel. Ty was angry and stopped himself from screaming at Bianca. He dismissed her plea for him to let Bridget explain. Bianca tried to defend Bridget, saying it wasn't what Ty thought and that it was just a stupid mistake. She also said that Bridget was to blame and asked Ty not to do anything drastic. She also said that Bridget should be the one to talk to him. However, Ty was still angry and said that someone would be there when Bridget arrived, but it wouldn't be him. He also said that Bridget had broken their marriage and that she wanted to continue. Despite Bianca's pleas, Ty informed her that he had already told their children about the situation, including the weekends when Bridget claimed to be taking care of her mother. He said the children had taken the news surprisingly well, hope and reconsideration. Ty reiterated that it was Bridget and Bianca who had discarded their family. He said goodbye to Bianca and mentioned saying goodbye to her mother, noting that she never liked him and now she must be laughing her skinny buns off. He disconnected, then looked around the small bungalow for the last time. Bridget will love it, he thought to himself, and laughed at the thought. He turned off all the lights, put the spare keys on the table along with the letter to Bridget, and went out the front door. He pulled the door shut, got into his rental car, and drove to Rachel's apartment. She was waiting in front of it. He got out of the car and helped her load her suitcases into the back. She climbed in and smiled at him as he shut the door. He got into the driver's seat and she slid in on the passenger side. She was ready for the challenge. She said that she was grateful to Bridget for getting rid of Ty, which meant she could snap him up and enjoy their weekends together. They drove away from Bridget's story, and Rachel revealed that when she called Ty to ask if he minded her staying a couple more days, he said he didn't mind. Over the next few days, she had a strange feeling that it might not be a good idea. She shared her conversation with Bianca, who laughed at the idea of spending more nights with Kevin and Ben. Rachel admitted feeling a twinge of guilt when thinking about her time with both of them, but that guilt didn't last long when she thought about how much she was enjoying it. She described a thrill of wetness between her legs when recalling the moments with Kevin and Ben. I shuddered once and picked up the phone. The conversation started as usual, Ty asking me if I was coming home. He sounded so normal, reminding me that this was a world that Ty knew nothing about. That gave me I had the courage to do what I knew I wanted. I went for it, asking him if he minded if I stayed a couple of days. I looked at Bianca when I did, and her grin reassured me that I was doing the right thing. I waited for his normal answer, doing whatever made me happy. I thought once again to myself that Ty wouldn't mind. I would never let him find out because it would hurt him too much. I love Ty, but I've lost interest in having sex with him. I found someone else I can have sex with and still love my husband. I discovered a wild side to myself that I never expected. I was completely caught up in the illicit pleasure he gave me. I was pleased with myself. My own pleasure drove my lust to spend just one or even two more nights with Kevin and Ben. I was already imagining our night together, and I was becoming warm at the thought until those words came out of the speaker and directly to my gut, destroying my world. Ty questioned why he should mind Bridget wanting to spend more nights with her lover. She mentioned her involvement with both him and another guy, Ben. Ty expressed uncertainty about the duration, wondering if it had been 6 months, or maybe even longer. He was really frustrated, like he was supposed to pretend it was nothing. Bridget couldn't speak in response to Ty's accusations. I was frozen in fear and panic. I slammed the phone down and let out a loud sob. I couldn't get out more than that before it all became clear to me. Oh God, he knew, and my life was over. I was going to lose the only man I ever loved. I had to get home. I had to leave right away to catch him before he did something terrible. I grabbed my car keys and ran out of Bianca's kitchen. I started my car and backed out of her driveway. I turned and headed toward the interstate. I had to get home. The drive usually took me 3.5 to 4 hours, but I was pushing my car as fast as it would go. I was immune to any threat from the police who patrolled the interstate, and I cared nothing for speed limits. I had to get home before Ty had time to leave me. I needed to talk to him. I needed to tell him that I loved him and that I was a fool. I had done something stupid and selfish, but it didn't mean anything to me. Kevin and Ben were already gone. I'd never see them or Bianca again as long as I lived. I would tell him that I would give up everyone else if he would stay with me. I would say it over and over. I had gone over and over in my mind what I would say to persuade him not to throw me away. I had been seduced by Bianca and her lifestyle and the lack of intimacy in my relationship. Driving was a problem that she told me would disappear if I let myself go with someone who I didn't have to please or who I didn't care about. She had convinced me that this I thought it would reawaken my libido and that Ty would benefit. I was just going to try to get my drive back, but then I was seduced by the lust and the thrill of doing something naughty. It would revive me, and I would carry that back to my marriage bed with my husband. I was pleased at that. I thought it would work. Ty would listen. I had to drive another 100 miles before I asked Ty why none of the lust had carried over and why we hadn't made love in 6 months. I had to think of an answer, but I didn't have one. I pulled into the driveway of our house and was surprised to see 4 cars there. I recognized the 2 belonging to my children, and I was surprised to see them there, but I also had a feeling of dread at their presence. I drove around them onto the grass and stopped. I stopped and got out of the car to run towards the house. As I did, I saw someone get out of one of the strange cars and move to intercept me at the front door. I ignored this man and reached for my keys. He tried to stop me, but I pushed him aside and slid my key into the lock. It didn't work, so I tried again. I tried again and again, but it just wouldn't work. I threw the key on the porch and started crying. I turned to the door and started pounding on it with my fists. I kept going until the pain in my hands forced me to stop. I looked around to see the man who got out of the car was still there. He asked me if I was Mrs. Tyson Summers, and I nodded. He handed me an envelope and said in a low voice, "You are served, madam." He then took another smaller envelope and handed that to me. "These are the keys to your new residence. The address is inside, and the property is yours without burden. You will find the deed and the necessary information inside." I took both envelopes and just stared at him. My mind was numb with sadness and pain. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a legal document. He said, "Madam, you are served." He then took another smaller envelope and handed it to me. "These are the keys to your new residence. The address is inside, and the property is yours without burden. You will find the deed and the necessary information inside." I took both envelopes and just stared at him. My mind was numb with sadness and pain. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me this is a small white envelope. It contains several checks representing the current savings and checking accounts, which have been closed. The house has been listed for sale, and the proceeds will go to you once the sale is completed. All of this is included in the divorce statements, and the terms are spelled out very clearly. The man closed his briefcase and prepared to leave. He took a business card out of his jacket pocket. "This is the name of your husband's attorney." He drove away and spoke to the person sitting in the other car. I didn't recognize them before backing out and leaving. I was holding the envelopes that the man had given me. I glanced down at the business card and saw that it was Stacy Reinhardt. I felt a surge of anger, but it quickly subsided. I had convinced myself that Stacy was a problem, but I knew that wasn't true. I had used her as a way of making Tay feel guilty, but I knew better now. Still, it didn't help to look up and see her walking towards me. "Hello, Bridget. You don't look so well today. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Ty asked me to handle things in his absence. If you've got any questions, I can answer them now. Ty retired on Friday, and we all had a party for him. It was a great party, and lots of people came to see him off. It's a shame you missed it, but I understand you had other things to do. The second house has been put on the market. You signed a power of attorney some time ago. A while ago, Ty transferred the title into his name, but don't worry, the proceeds are all yours. He left it to you in the divorce and also bought you a nice bungalow, which he paid for with furniture. Your children can take you there. Finally, Ty gave me full power to act in his behalf in the divorce and all his affairs here in the States. Ty has left the country, and I believe it is his. She made it clear she wasn't planning to come back for a while. As I processed everything she told me, I felt like each piece was a hammer pounding the stake in my heart deeper and deeper. I was almost gasping for breath at the suddenness with which my life had collapsed in on me. I opened my mouth to ask questions, but nothing came out. I realized that I had been smacked by a man whom I was blindly betrayed and disrespected by a man I knew was the only one I could ever love. I lost his love and I had no idea what to do. I felt more alone than I had in the last 20 years I had my children and my life, but my anchor to everything I cared about in this world had left me. I'd never felt so alone in my life. I don't know why you did this to me. Tyson, Bridget, I've worked with him for 15 years and I know he loved you and his kids more than anything. When he found out what you were doing, it almost killed him. Roger and I helped him through it and made sure he stayed calm enough to make plans to deal with you. We made sure he didn't do anything foolish. Just so you know, he considered self. We managed to talk him out of it by reminding him of your children. He's with someone else now, who also helped him through the crisis you caused by your actions. It's not important who she is, just that she is with him and will care for him as this slowly runs its course. Tyson will not agree to talk to you, and he doesn't care if you fight the divorce. That will be in my hands, not his, so do what you will. Just know that Tyson is out of your life and will never be back." She turned and walked back to her car without looking back. I got into the car on the passenger side, and it left. I walked slowly down the drive to my children, who were standing together beside the cars. I had to face them and listen to their anger and condemnation, but I really didn't care anymore. I had betrayed my husband, their father, and I had lost him. Nothing else mattered. Their anger at me would not make any difference. Nothing they could say or do could hurt any more than the words I heard from Ty just that morning. God, how they hurt, and all he did was state the truth as he saw it. As I stopped in front of them, Jake and Tessa were there for me when I needed them most. Jake helped me to stand, but I could see that he was angry, disgusted, and disappointed. I was so upset that I started to cry. Instead of comforting me, my daughter stood in front of me with her arms crossed and her face showed the same emotions as her brother. I had thought that I couldn't feel any worse after losing Ty, but the looks on my children's faces told me otherwise. They saw what I did, and it was even worse. I cried for what I had lost as my children stood by and waited. They offered no comfort. I had lost them as well. I turned and looked once more at the home Ty and I had purchased to build our family. I loved that house and had always felt pride when I came home. Now it was gone. Everything was gone. My husband, my marriage, the love of my children, and the home we shared. What have I done? Why did I never think of the consequences of my actions? Why had I never considered that I knew now? Consequences are a real pain,